Welcome. What you are about to watch is not science fiction, and it is not folklore. It is a serious investigation into one of history's most compelling unresolved questions: the mystery of the Ggantija Temples of Malta, the world's oldest freestanding stone structures. Across the world, in universities, research institutes, and field excavations, serious scholars are wrestling with evidence that does not fit the accepted story. Evidence that has been documented, measured, and peer-reviewed, and that still has no satisfying conventional explanation. We are going to look at that evidence carefully, without prejudice in either direction, not dismissing what is extraordinary, but not accepting it without scrutiny either. The truth, as always, is in the details. The island of Gozo, just 4 kilometers north of Malta, contains 2 stone temples that are older than any other freestanding stone structures on Earth. The Ggantija Temples were built approximately 600 BCE, that is 600 years ago, making them older than Stonehenge by 1,000 years, older than the Pyramids of Giza by 1,000 years, and older than the invention of the wheel. They were constructed by people who had no metal tools, no writing system, no wheeled vehicles, and apparently no knowledge of any similar building tradition anywhere else in the world. The largest stones used in their walls, weigh up to 50 tons, were quarried kilometers away and were fitted together with a precision that has kept them standing for 56 centuries. The builders of Ggantija were part of Malta's extraordinary temple-building culture, the same people who built the Hypogeum and the Ggantija's sister temples at Hagar Qim and Mnajdra. Between approximately 600 and 500 BCE, this small island civilization constructed at least 20 monumental stone temples of a type found nowhere else in the world, using a distinctive architectural plan that features curved apses arranged around a central axis. These temples are not rough megalithic piles. They are carefully planned, precisely executed sacred spaces with polished interior floors, built-in altars, water channels, and rooms designed for specific ritual functions, including animal sacrifice, oracle consultation, and storage of ritual equipment. They represent an architectural sophistication that, on any conventional timeline of human development, should not exist at this date. And then, around 500 BCE, the civilization that built them ceased to exist. The temples were used for centuries after their construction, the evidence suggests, but around 500 BCE they were abandoned, and the people who built them, genetically distinct from the populations who later inhabited Malta, simply disappeared from the archaeological record. They were replaced by a different population with different burial customs, different pottery styles, and apparently no interest in maintaining the temples. The builders of the world's oldest freestanding stone structures left their masterpieces standing in the fields of Gozo and Malta and vanished, leaving behind no explanation of who they were, what they believed, or why they built the most ambitious sacred architecture the Neolithic world ever produced. The temples are still standing. Their builders are still missing. This is where our investigation begins. Stay with us, because the further we go into the evidence, the more extraordinary it becomes. The story you think you know is only the surface. Beneath it lies something far more remarkable. Let us begin. Before we go further, if you are finding this investigation compelling, please take a moment right now to like this video, drop a comment below with your thoughts, and share it with someone who loves a good historical mystery. If you are watching on YouTube, hit subscribe and tap the bell icon so you never miss a new episode. If you found us through Facebook, tap follow on our page. It takes just a few seconds, and it genuinely helps us keep making these documentaries. Now, let us get back to the investigation. Before we examine the specific evidence, we need to step back and understand the context. This case does not exist in isolation. It sits within the global puzzle of unexplained ancient construction, and to properly evaluate what we are looking at, we need to understand the broader picture that surrounds it. The sky was the original clock, calendar, and map. Before writing, before money, before cities, human beings looked up and organized their lives around what they saw. The position of the sun at solstice told them when to plant and when to harvest. The rising of specific stars marked the seasons. The phases of the moon governed ceremonial calendars in cultures from Ireland to India. Our ancestors were not casual observers of the night sky. They were meticulous, obsessive, and precise in a way that rivals modern astronomical science. This precision is encoded in stone at sites around the world. Newgrange in Ireland is aligned so precisely that sunlight enters its inner chamber only during the 5 days around the winter solstice, and it has done so every year for more than 5,000 years. The Pyramids of Giza are oriented to true north with an accuracy of 0.05 degrees. Stonehenge tracks both the midsummer sunrise and the midwinter sunset, as well as the 18-6-year lunar cycle. These alignments are not accidental. They were engineered with mathematical precision by cultures we have long underestimated. What drove this obsession with celestial mechanics? Partly practical. Agriculture depends on knowing the seasons, but partly something more profound. Ancient cultures believed the sky was alive, that the movements of stars and planets determined the fates of kingdoms and harvests. In this worldview, encoding celestial cycles into permanent stone was not merely useful but sacred. The great monuments of the ancient world are, among other things, the most durable clocks ever built. This context matters because it tells us something important. What we are about to investigate is not an isolated curiosity. It is part of a pattern that researchers in multiple fields have been independently documenting for decades. And patterns in science demand explanation. With that foundation in place, let us now turn to the specific case at hand. Now we reach the heart of the matter. The core evidence surrounding the Ggantija Temples of Malta, the world's oldest freestanding stone structures, is more extensive, more verified, and more troubling for conventional explanations than most people realize. Let us walk through it systematically, fact by fact, and allow the evidence to speak for itself. We are not going to speculate here. Every point that follows is documented in peer-reviewed publications, official archaeological records, or government archives that are publicly accessible. The question is not whether these facts are real. The question is what they mean. Consider this first extraordinary detail. The Ggantija temples consist of two adjacent but separate temple structures on the island of Gozo, the smaller sister island of Malta. The larger southern temple was built first, around 3600 BCE, followed by the smaller northern temple around 3000 BCE. Together they share a massive outer boundary wall up to 6 meters high and 5 meters thick, constructed from huge coralline limestone blocks. The name Ggantija derives from the Maltese word for giantess. The local tradition holds that the temples were built by a race of giants, specifically by a giantess named Sansuna, who allegedly carried the stones on her head while nursing a child. This folk memory of superhuman construction capability reflects genuine bewilderment at how the structures were built. This single data point, if taken in isolation, might be set aside. Anomalies happen. Instruments malfunction. Researchers make mistakes. But as we continue, you will see that this is not an isolated anomaly. It is part of a consistent and documented pattern. But that is only the beginning. Researchers also discovered the largest stones in the Ggantija temple walls are approximately 5 meters long, 3 meters wide, and weigh up to 50 tons. These coralline limestone blocks were quarried from outcroppings approximately 2 kilometers from the temple site and transported without the use of wheeled vehicles. The wheel was not introduced to Malta until considerably later. The prevailing hypothesis for transport is that the blocks were moved on limestone ball bearings, rounded stone spheres approximately 10 centimeters in diameter, which have been found at multiple Maltese temple sites in contexts consistent with use as rollers. Experimental archaeology has confirmed that this technique can significantly reduce the friction required to slide large stone blocks. Now, a skeptic might propose an alternative explanation for this, and that is entirely reasonable. We should always test alternative explanations before accepting extraordinary ones. The problem is that the alternative explanations, when examined carefully, create more problems than they solve. The mystery deepens when we examine. The interior architecture of the Ggantija temples features multiple curved apses arranged in a trefoil or cloverleaf pattern around a central corridor, a floor plan that is unique to Malta's temple-building culture and appears at all 20 of the island's major temple sites with remarkable consistency. The apses were used for different ritual activities. Excavation has found ash deposits and animal bones consistent with sacrificial fires in some apses, stone altars with cup marks in others, and carefully arranged deposits of ceramic vessels in others. The consistency of the plan across 20 temples built over more than 1,000 years suggests a highly conservative religious tradition in which the correct configuration of sacred space was as important as any specific ritual performed within it. This is where the conventional account begins to strain. Each individual fact might be dismissed or minimized in isolation. But the cumulative weight of the evidence is another matter entirely. Perhaps most remarkable of all, the population that built the Ggantija temples and Malta's other monuments was genetically distinct from modern Maltese people and from the Bronze Age populations that replaced them around 500 BCE. Ancient DNA analysis, published in 2019, established that the temple builders descended from early Anatolian farmers who reached Malta around 5000 BCE via the Mediterranean migration route. This population lived in relative genetic isolation on the Maltese archipelago for approximately 500 years, before abruptly disappearing from the genetic record around 500–400 BCE. The replacement population, which arrived at the same time the temples ceased to be actively maintained, shows genetic signatures consistent with populations from mainland Europe, possibly including some steppe-related ancestry. Researchers who have examined this evidence have described it as genuinely difficult to explain within the accepted framework. These are not fringe commentators. They are credentialed academics publishing in mainstream journals, raising questions that the field has not yet satisfactorily answered. Then there is the matter of animal sacrifice was an important component of the ritual activities conducted at Ggantija and the other Maltese temples. Excavations have recovered the bones of cattle, sheep, goats, and pigs from the temple interiors, with many bones showing evidence of burning and deliberate deposition. The altar niches in Ggantija's apses contain carved stone basins that may have been used to collect sacrificial blood. Additionally, multiple figurines have been found in the temples depicting animals and humans, including several famous fat lady figures, rotund human figures of ambiguous gender, sometimes seated and sometimes standing, interpreted as representations of an earth goddess or fertility deity. These figurines are among the most distinctive artifacts of Malta's temple culture and have become icons of prehistoric European religion. What makes this particularly significant is its independence from the previous points. This is not a case of one theory requiring another. These are separate lines of evidence converging on the same uncomfortable conclusion. Adding to the enigma is this finding. The Ggantija temples were designated a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 1980 as part of the megalithic Temples of Malta inscription that also covers Hagar Qim and Mnajdra, Skorba, and Tarxian. The site has been excavated multiple times since its initial discovery by European scholars in the 19th century, with the most recent significant work conducted in the 2000s. Despite extensive excavation, the site still yields new findings. In 2008, a previously unrecognized series of pits near the outer wall was found to contain deposits of ritual material, including broken figurines, animal bones, and ceramic vessels, suggesting that the area immediately surrounding the temples was also used for ritual activities, expanding our understanding of the sacred space the temples anchored. taken together. These facts form a pattern that cannot be explained by coincidence, misidentification, or methodological error. Each piece of evidence has been examined by skeptics. Each has been subjected to alternative explanations, and in each case, the alternative explanation falls short of accounting for everything that has been documented. We are left with a body of evidence that demands explanation and an accepted narrative that does not provide one. This is where serious inquiry begins. Now that we have established the evidence, we need to examine the theories that researchers have proposed to explain the Ggantija Temples of Malta, the world's oldest freestanding stone structures. This is where the debate becomes most intense, because the theories reflect not just different interpretations of the same evidence, but fundamentally different assumptions about what is possible and what the past looked like. Understanding these theories is not just an academic exercise. Each one has been championed by serious researchers with genuine credentials, and each one captures something that the others miss. The truth, if it is ever established, will likely draw on elements of several. The first major explanation proposed by researchers holds that the fertility cult temple theory is the dominant interpretation. Ggantija and the other Maltese temples served as centers of a religion focused on fertility, the agricultural cycle, and Vena ratio, of a goddess figure represented by the rotund fat lady figurines. Proponents argue that the trefoil floor plan replicates the shape of the human body in a recumbent posture. The two side apses representing legs, the back apse the head, turning the temple itself into a symbolic embodiment of the goddess. The sacrificial fires and animal deposits would then be offerings made within the goddess's body. This theory is elegant, but depends on interpretations of figurine iconography that not all archaeologists accept. This interpretation has significant academic support and is backed by substantial evidence, but it is not without problems. Critics point out that it requires assumptions that go beyond what the evidence strictly supports, and that key predictions of this theory have not been confirmed by subsequent research. It remains contested, and the contest is productive. A rival school of thought argues that the oracle and pilgrimage center theory proposes that Ggantija, like the other Maltese temples, served as a regional oracle center where individuals or communities came from across the island to consult priests or priestesses who delivered divine pronouncements. The elaborate altar niches, the acoustic properties of the enclosed stone chambers, and the extensive deposits of ritual materials suggest sustained ceremonial use over many centuries. Under this model, the temples were destinations, places that attracted pilgrims and offerings from a wide catchment area, rather than local neighborhood shrines. The survival of 20 separate temples, each with similar floor plans but different sizes and positions, would reflect the regional distribution of oracle centers in a pre-literate theocracy. This theory is controversial, and deliberately so. Its proponents argue that the evidence demands an explanation outside the conventional framework. Critics counter that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, and that the evidence presented, while suggestive, does not yet meet that standard. The debate continues in peer-reviewed literature. Perhaps the most unconventional theory suggests that the astronomical calendar theory argues that the Maltese temples, including Ggantija, were designed with specific solar or lunar alignments that structured the ritual calendar. The temple at Mnajdra is the most celebrated example, with chambers that are illuminated by solstice and equinox sunrise. Some researchers have proposed alignments at Ggantija as well, though these have been disputed. If the temples were designed as solar calendars similar to Newgrange, their construction at multiple locations across the islands would have created a distributed network of calendrical sites serving different communities at different times of the agricultural year. What is striking about this debate is not merely that experts disagree. That is normal and healthy in science. What is striking is the quality of the disagreement. Serious researchers, working from the same body of evidence, reaching genuinely different conclusions. That level of fundamental disagreement, when it persists over decades, is a signal that something important has not yet been understood. The question is not which of these theories is right. The question is whether any of them is right, or whether the truth is something that none of the current frameworks has yet been able to capture. The case surrounding the Ggantija Temples of Malta, the world's oldest freestanding stone structures, does not rest on speculation alone. What distinguishes this investigation from pure mythology is the existence of documented, physical, verifiable evidence, material that has been examined by credentialed researchers and whose authenticity is not seriously disputed. What is disputed is its interpretation. Let us review the most significant documented evidence as objectively as possible. We are not going to cherry-pick the data that supports a preferred conclusion. We are going to lay out what exists and let you draw your own assessment. Physical evidence supporting this account includes: the construction date of the Ggantija temples has been established through multiple radiocarbon dates from organic material, charcoal, animal bone, and charred seeds, recovered from sealed contexts within the temples and immediately beneath the earliest floor layers. These dates consistently cluster around 600 BCE for the initial construction of the southern temple, with subsequent phases of use and modification extending to approximately 400 BCE, when the site appears to have been abandoned. The stratigraphic relationship between the dated materials and the temple architecture confirms that the radiocarbon dates reflect the construction period and not later contamination. This evidence has been subjected to independent verification. Skeptics have examined it. Alternative explanations have been proposed and tested. The data remains. The question of what it means remains open. Investigators have documented the stoneworking techniques used at Ggantija demonstrate a sophisticated understanding of limestone's properties and a systematic approach to shaping and fitting large blocks. The inner wall stones, which are made from the softer Globigerina limestone rather than the harder coralline limestone used for the outer walls, were carefully worked to produce smooth curved surfaces that define the apses. Tool marks visible on some interior stones show that the builders used small flint tools to dress the surface systematically from top to bottom, suggesting organized work crews with specialized skills. The differential use of two different limestone types, harder for structural walls, softer for interior surfaces, indicates a deliberate engineering decision rather than opportunistic use of available material. This evidence has been subjected to independent verification. Skeptics have examined it. Alternative explanations have been proposed and tested. The data remains. The question of what it means remains open. On-site analysis revealed the continuity of the trefoil temple plan across 20 separate Maltese temples built over more than 1,000 years is perhaps the strongest evidence for a coherent and stable religious tradition. Statistical analysis of the floor plans of all surviving Maltese temples shows that the proportional relationships between the central corridor, side apses, and back apse are maintained with remarkable consistency across sites of very different scales and from very different periods of the temple building sequence. This consistency implies that the plan was not determined by practical or structural considerations. It was a sacred blueprint that had to be replicated correctly for the space to be ritually effective. The knowledge of this blueprint was maintained and transmitted across at least 40 generations of temple builders. This evidence has been subjected to independent verification. Skeptics have examined it. Alternative explanations have been proposed and tested. The data remains. The question of what it means remains open. Each individual piece of evidence might, in principle, be explained away. A single anomalous artifact might be misidentified. A single anomalous date might reflect contamination. A single anomalous eyewitness account might reflect misperception. The question is whether all of the evidence can be explained away, and whether the explanations required are more or less plausible than the evidence itself. When multiple independent lines of inquiry converge on the same conclusion, that convergence is the most powerful signal in empirical science. And that is exactly what we are seeing here. We have examined the history, the evidence, and the theories surrounding the Ggantija Temples of Malta, the world's oldest freestanding stone structures. Now, we need to ask the question that is sometimes overlooked in discussions of ancient mysteries. Why does this matter? What does it mean for us today? It would be easy to file this away as an interesting historical curiosity, a puzzle from a distant past with no bearing on our present lives. That would be a fundamental mistake. The questions raised by this case touch on issues that are directly relevant to who we are, where we came from, and what the human story actually looks like before the period covered by conventional history. The Ggantija temples have benefited in recent years from improved conservation infrastructure and increased international research attention. A new heritage interpretation center opened on Gozo in 2012, providing visitors with contextual information about the temples and the broader Maltese prehistoric culture. Conservation challenges remain significant. The soft Glabigerina limestone of the interior walls is highly susceptible to erosion from rain and humidity, and protective roofing structures have been installed over several Maltese temple sites to reduce weather damage. The challenge of protecting 600-year-old stone in a Mediterranean climate without compromising the authenticity of the archaeological experience is one that heritage managers continue to grapple with. The scientific questions surrounding Ggantija and the Maltese temple culture remain among the most fascinating in prehistoric archaeology. The disappearance of the temple building population around 500 BCE, which coincides with similar population discontinuities across Atlantic Europe, including in Ireland, suggests that the early 3rd millennium BCE was a period of dramatic demographic change across the Mediterranean and European world. Understanding why these extraordinary civilizations ceased to exist may be as important as understanding how they built their monuments. Current research using ancient DNA, isotope analysis of human remains, and paleoclimate data is attempting to reconstruct the environmental and social conditions that led to the collapse of Malta's greatest cultural achievement. And the answers may illuminate not just what happened on Malta, but what happened across the Neolithic world at the end of its most creative period. Furthermore, the tools available to investigate these questions are advancing rapidly. Satellite imaging, ground-penetrating radar, ancient DNA analysis, isotopic tracing, and deep-sea sonar are all providing capabilities that previous generations of researchers could only dream of. Cases that were genuinely unresolvable 10 years ago are now open to new analysis, and the findings, consistently, are expanding rather than contracting the mystery. The investigation continues. New discoveries are being made. New analyses are being published. New voices are entering the conversation from disciplines that were not previously part of the discussion. The answers, when they come, and they will come, will not merely solve a historical puzzle. They will force a fundamental revision of assumptions that underpin our entire understanding of human history and human potential. We have now walked through the complete case of the Ggantija Temples of Malta, the world's oldest freestanding stone structures, from the historical record, through the physical evidence, across the competing theories, and into the modern significance of what remains unresolved. What the story of Ggantija ultimately reveals is not just a historical puzzle. It is a mirror. It reflects our assumptions back at us, our assumptions about what ancient people were capable of, about how knowledge is gained and lost across the centuries, and about the relationship between what we know and what we merely think we know. The evidence presented in this documentary is real. The questions it raises are genuine. The debate among researchers is ongoing, and that is healthy. Science is not a set of conclusions. It is a process. And the process requires that we remain open to evidence that challenges what we thought we knew, however uncomfortable that challenge might be. If you came to this documentary as a skeptic, we hope the evidence gave you something to think about. If you came as a true believer, we hope the critical examination gave you a more nuanced picture. The truth, as always, lies in the evidence, not in what we want to be true. Thank you for watching. If this investigation sparked your curiosity, please help us reach more people. If you are watching on YouTube, subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new documentary. If you are watching on Facebook, tap the follow button on our page to stay connected. We publish new documentaries every week, covering the full range of historical mysteries that the mainstream has not yet adequately explained. Leave a comment telling us which case you want us to investigate next. The conversation continues. The investigation never ends.